Greetings, boils and ghouls. Today we're talking about parts of the human body.
You gotta watch Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
Anyway, today we are talking about body parts preserved
by the Catholic Church. Let's see what these guys have been up to. We're just gonna get right down to the nitty-gritty here, because the first disturbing body part preserved by the Catholic Church that I would love to talk about is Jesus's prepuce, aka his foreskin. We warned you this list would be disturbing. You see, because Jesus was born Jewish, he underwent circumcision at a very young age. And because Jesus was born Jesus, this was a big deal. For relic hunters, that is, who believed that the removal of Jesus's prepuce, as they call it, meant that it did not ascend to heaven with the rest of his body, as it is said in the Bible that Jesus went up body and soul into heaven in the sight of his apostles. But let's get back to the bits. Or bit, which was regarded by the Catholic Church as a holy item. The holy foreskin, if you will. I didn't come up with that, that's actually what they called it. Throughout the years, dozens of churches have claimed to have been in possession of the prepuce, the majority of which are located in France. In 800 AD, it is said that the prepuce became a gift for Pope Leo III, who was living in Rome at the time, but in the 16th century, it was moved to Calcutta. Other foreskins have been brought to the Pope in the hopes of being authenticated, but the Vatican did its best to not entertain that type of behavior. The prepuces that were authenticated by the church, however, were celebrated, and one was even seen bleeding when it was worshipped during a mass. Today it is believed that all holy bits and bobs have been lost, and in 1900 Pope Leo XIII ruled that anyone who referenced the piece would be excommunicated from the church. Like, that's cool and all, but I just want to know where the hell people were getting all of these prepuces.
Next, we have the head of St. John Baptist, which is housed in Amiens Cathedral in France. It's also on display in the Basilica of St. Sylvester I in Rome. Oh, and the German Museum in Munich also claims they have St. John's head, and there's one on display in Syria as well. St. John wasn't known to have 4 heads though, so who has the real one? Well, the one in France has the most ornate presentation. I mean, just look at this thing. That is quite a beautiful way to display a head. The story behind this relic is that it was brought back from Constantinople in 1206 by a crusader named Wallen de Sartine. The Amiens Cathedral was also constructed for the sole purpose of housing St. John the Baptist relics, so I'm gonna guess this is the true head. The ones in Germany and Syria are also covered up by cloth, so who really knows what's under there. And the one in Italy is theorized to have belonged to a local martyr who was just also named St. John.
Next up, if you were a bit disappointed by just the tip, you should be happy to know that it is also believed that the church kept Jesus's umbilical cord as well. The umbilical cord was said to be kept in the Lateran Palace in Rome in a chapel known as the Sancta Sanctorum, the place of holy things. This is where many of Christianity's most important relics were once stored. To access the chapel would require a person to climb the Scala Santa, the holy steps that Jesus himself was believed to descend from to attend his trial with Pontius Pilate, during which Jesus was crucified. There are 28 marble steps leading up to the chapel, which contains a list of relics that were kept there during the 11th century. While some relics were kept sealed in wooden chests and in altars, others were on full display to those who wished to view them. And of course, one of these items just so happened to be the umbilical cord of Jesus Christ himself, which hung inside of a cross made from the purest gold, adorned with the finest gems. Also said to be hung inside the cross, you know, not much, just the holy tip.
Next up, we have St. Anthony's tongue and jaw. These are 2 intricately detailed, beautifully ornate pieces, but housed inside is St. Anthony's jaw, and in the other is his tongue, which is pretty awesome. That's how I'll be displaying all my tongues and jaws from now on, or at least that's what I wish I could do. For now, it'll just have to sit in my crappy repurposed jam jars and my wooden shelf from IKEA. The story goes that St. Anthony's body was exhumed over 3 decades after his death but yet somehow his tongue hadn't decomposed, and this was perfect because he'd been remembered for all his enthralling sermons. So they removed the tongue, and John decided to house them at the Basilica of St. Anthony in Padua.
Alright, next up we have the severed head of St. Catherine of Siena, a prime example of how proper skincare and meticulous post-mortuary preservation can keep a woman looking young for centuries. I mean, she's clearly dead, but there's not a wrinkle in sight. St. Catherine of Siena was born on March 25th of 1347 and died on April 29th of 1380 at the age of 33. She was a Christ figure, best known for the fact that she experienced stigmata, the appearance of bodily wounds in locations that correspond with the crucifixion wounds of Jesus Christ. She also experienced mystical visions throughout her life, and although she died young of natural causes, she was deemed a martyr, a person killed because of their religious beliefs, because of what people considered to be her holy wounds. She died near her convent in Rome, but her head was later stolen and brought back to Siena, the birthplace of St. Catherine, after her death. It is said, and this is legend, so bear with me, that the men who stole it were captured by Roman guards, but before they could be tried, St. Catherine's remains turned into hundreds of rose petals. The thieves who had stolen her head with good intentions began making their way back to Siena, only to have the head reappear in their satchel as though it had never left.
Next on the list we have St. Oliver Plunkett's head. A lot of heads on this list, which makes sense, it is everyone's most recognizable feature. The head is currently displayed in St. Peter's Church in Ireland. St. Oliver Plunkett is an important figure in Irish and Catholic history. Born in 1625, he became the head of the Catholic Church in Ireland. At the time, Catholics in Ireland were heavily persecuted by the English government, and Plunkett worked hard to support and reorganize the church. But because of this, Plunkett also became a target. In 1679, during a period of anti-Catholic hysteria, he was falsely accused of planning to bring French soldiers into Ireland to start a rebellion. He was arrested and taken to London for trial. He was found guilty of high treason. You could say he had a target on his head. On July 1st of 1681, Oliver Plunkett was executed in London. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered. The story goes that his head was then brought to Rome and then hidden in a nunnery that was led by Plunkett's grandniece, where it remained until 1921.
Okay, so while this next one is not a body part that was preserved by the Catholic Church themselves, it's parts of a body that were kept by a member of the Catholic Church, and it's disturbing, so it definitely belongs on this list. Around 1830, Saint Lidwina was born in Schiedam, Holland, and 16 years later, the same woman fell while ice skating and developed the strangest condition. She was mostly paralyzed, sensitive to the light, and in constant chronic pain, and as a result she spent the rest of her life primarily bedridden, only able to move her right arm. Eventually she developed a skin condition which caused her flesh to fall right off of her body. Now here's where things get weird. Well, weirder. For some strange reason, these chunks of flesh smelled incredibly sweet, and so her parents gathered them all up and put them in a vase. I mean, personally, I'll stick to flowers, but you do you. Now you'd probably think Lidwina would be pretty pissed off at the world, what with this being her existence and all, but no. In fact, she considered her suffering to be a gift from God, and pretty soon she had a pretty substantial following. One man even paid to have water she had washed her hands in brought all the way to England, and lo and behold, it solved his leg problem when he drank it or bathed in it or whatever. Another woman had a vision that Lidwina's breasts had filled with milk, although she was not pregnant nor had she ever been a mother, but sure enough, Lidwina provided her with milk, which the woman happily drank 3 times. Gross.
Next up we have St. Clare's nails and hair, which I find kind of the grossest. Hands, tongues, heads, I mean that's all fine, but fingernails and hair clippings? That just feels like some serial killer style collecting right there. And the hair was collected by one of her followers, who I gotta imagine sat up late at night sniffing it. You see, St. Clare was known for having long, luscious locks, but in 1212, wanting to rid herself of anything that could be seen as vain in the eyes of the Lord, she had her hair cut off, but it was then collected by an unknown follower. The hair is currently housed in the Basilica of St. Clare in Assisi, Italy, Along with the hair, there's also a small shrine containing some of her fingernail clippings.
Alright, next up we have the Virgin Mary's breast milk. Oh god, here we go again. During the Byzantine era, the site of what is now known as the Chapel of the Milk Grotto, located in Bethlehem in the Palestinian territories, was a center of Christian pilgrimage. This center is also where it is believed that the Virgin Mary gave birth to the Son of God. You may know him, his name is Jesus Christ. Well, according to legend, while breastfeeding her son, some of the Virgin Mary's milk supposedly dropped onto the floor, and it turned the stone on the floor white. Fast forward to 1872 and the Chapel of the Milk Grotto was built in the very spot. Now, I bet right about now you're assuming that you can visit this spot, the site of the Great Milk Drop, and see the stone guarded by velvet ropes and highly trained security guards. Well, you can't, because instead of preserving the ancient relic, the grotto decided to do something else with it. Any guesses? If you said find a way to mass produce and sell the stone, you'd be correct. That's right, the site sells limestone powder made from the grotto's ground up milk-stained stone for just $2 a pack. As a keepsake? No, that's silly, there's no return customers in keepsakes. It's sold as a cure, meant to be dissolved into a drink and consumed by anyone suffering from any ailment. The third-class relic truly is a miracle.
And lastly, we have St. Francis Xavier's arm. The presentation here is nice, but it's still a 472-year-old severed arm, so it's pretty gnarly. Turns out Lucio Fulci's zombie movies are pretty accurate about what decomposing corpses look like. The arm toured across churches in Canada a few years back, giving the Canucks a chance to see an arm that was said to have baptized over 100,000 people up close for the first time. Xavier died in 1552, and the majority of his body is in India. It's only left the Vatican a handful of times, so this was a big deal for people that didn't want to spend an arm and a leg traveling all the way to Europe to see it. Well,
bet you didn't know all of that.
give us a hand, folks, in the comments for this fantastic
Or
video.
Go tell your friends all about it. Everything you heard here today. Tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your grandma.
Tell your uncles and aunts.
Your poor grandma.
We'll catch you in the next video.
Yeah. Who believe that the removal of Jesus's prepuce.
What?
Prepuce.
In Irish and Catholic history, born in 1625.
Yay!